Hi, this is Trent from Speak2Read. I'm continuing the conversation about testing for dyslexia and testing for learning disabilities, and should have another blog post coming up pretty soon on the website at speak2read.ca/blog. Part one, the first blog post talked about some pitfalls of testing, things we want to think about when we're testing for dyslexia or testing for learning disabilities. Part two is coming pretty quick. And one of the really important things that I wanted to talk about from that second blog post is something called teaching to the test. So there's some assessment tasks that we have that are really effective for looking at some of the components of reading and speech and language and things like that. So they're really good things to assess, but then they're not necessarily really good things to test for. To test. They're great things to test, but they're not necessarily good things to then go and work on. I lost my train of thought there. Let's give you an example. One of the things that I frequently see is that children, especially like children later kindergarten, grade 1 and beyond, will have a goal for rhyming. And so rhyming is one of the first phonological awareness tasks that develop. However, the thing we want to know about is that it develops for kids implicitly. So for most kids, just listening to and being exposed to people talk, being exposed to language, they pick up an appreciation for rhyming, and they can start to recognize rhymes and hear when words sound the same. And this isn't done explicitly. Nobody's saying to these kids, you know, whenever you hear a word that the vowel and all the consonants after are the same, if it has the same vowel sound and all the consonants after are the same, they're going to rhyme. Nobody's really teaching that to kids. They're just picking it up from exposure. So when we go in to test kids, we love to test rhyming because it tells us the brains that are organizing around sounds and sound patterns and the brains that aren't. So it's a really good, easy divider where we can pick out some brains that are undeveloped in sound organization. So that's good information to know. However, it's not very effective to then go and teach rhyming. Rhyming's not a very functional skill. You don't really need rhyming for anything. In reading, we use it very little, and where it does have some instructional value with things like word families and things like that, by the time you teach word families, you're already into grade 1, and it's much more functional to just go teach the word families, maybe introduce rhyming as a concept within that. And what I often see is that people set rhyming as the first goal because they're working on phonological awareness sequentially, and rhyming is the first thing that develops. So then they want to work on rhyming, and they never move past rhyming. And the problem there is that phonological awareness really gets effective when it turns into phonemic awareness, and you start working on individual sounds. And if you get stuck on rhyming, you're not actually working at the sound level. You're kind of working in the syllable level, or the coda part of the syllable. And so it's not going to make a big impact for reading and writing and spelling. So we don't want to get stuck on rhyming. And rhyming has a place within a program in pre-kindergarten and kindergarten, and it should be explicitly taught a little bit there, but beyond that, it's not something we want to focus on. It's just not practical, and it's just not functional. And if your child is in like mid-kindergarten or grade 1 and beyond, and they have a goal to work on rhyming, I would be very concerned. And I would be talking to somebody about that because it's not going to be a functional goal, and they're going to fall behind. So another example of teaching to the test is we often like to test for nonsense words. When we test kids on non-words, it's going to completely eliminate any activation from the visual processing center and the language or the meaning center. So whenever a child has familiarity with a word from seeing it or from hearing it or talking about it, they've got some storage of it in their brain in the visual processing center and the language and meaning processing center. When we use a nonsense word, something they've never heard before, there's no activation from those areas. So the only part of the brain that can activate to help a child process that then is the sound processing area. That's all they have to operate with, is the way the word sounds. So it's a super functional task, and it really tells us a lot of information about what's going on in the sound processing area when we go in and we assess with nonsense words. However, I often see nonsense words making their way into instruction. Now, I use them a little bit, especially when I want to generalize something that we've been taught or show how a pattern could be generalized or see how a child would apply a pattern that we've picked up. But you don't want to have too many nonsense words in your instruction when you're looking at reading and writing. And why is that? Well, just like you wouldn't want to put a bunch of French or a bunch of German words in there if you're teaching English, it's not part of our language. And we're teaching kids to read and write and spell our language. And that means acquiring the vocabulary and the word knowledge and the word memory and all of that and the meaning for the words that we need them to know. So working on nonsense words is not functional. So this is something that I see a lot, is when we teach to the test. So we test for it, it comes out really weak. They got really poor rhyming skills. They got really poor nonsense word skills. So then we think, oh, well, let's go in and teach that and fix that. And then we're going to get that part of the brain stronger. The problem is that there's no application. You get the brain stronger at recognizing rhyming, but that doesn't do anything. they get better at rhyming, but that has no impact on how they read, write, and spell. Or they get better at nonsense words, being able to break them down and segment them or blend them together or repeat them. That's all well and good, but it actually has no impact on how they read, write, and spell actual words of English. So we always want to think about what's going to be functional, what's going to be integrated, and what is the application piece, and how is it going to make a difference. So now again, there's places where rhyming belongs, and there's places where nonsense words belong, you know, in small doses as part of a comprehensive program, maybe for certain ages or certain stages. But that's where we want to really be careful about what we're using the tests for. So that's the latest blog post for you. It'll be coming up pretty quick. Slide on over to speak2read.ca/blog and check out the rest of the site while you're there too. There's a lot of information for parents and educators on speech, language, and literacy, how those things develop, how they apply to education. And again, initial consultations, you can go in and look at your child's current program plan, maybe what some of the goals are, what would be effective, what would be functional. And I'm always happy to look at child's learning history and help you make a hypothesis about how your child learns and learn more about your child's individual learning profile. Thanks for tuning in, and we're going to see you around real soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.